Hello, YouTube. Stainless here. Got something. Gonna do something a little different. I've got a story for you. It's a ghost story, and the story is true, and I can vouch for it because I actually lived it. It's one of my stories, an experience I had back in the summer of 1995. At the time, I was going to school nights, I was working on my career. I was going to become a counselor. No, I take it back. I'm sorry. I was going to school during the day and working nights. And the night work I did was at a nonprofit residential rehabilitation center for people that were dealing with drug and alcohol problems. And it was housed in what used to be an old monastery. And this is in San Antonio. It was an old monastery that was being leased, or there was an arrangement where, with the archdiocese, the Catholic priest who ran the program was able to use this compound. It had a large 3-story dormitory. It was originally there for the students that were studying to become priests. There were several other buildings. There was a chapel, a church, school-sized cafeteria, and classrooms, and then a large recreational room. And there was a swimming pool. It was a pretty large facility. It was right next door to one of the missions. Here in San Antonio, we have several Spanish missions. When the Spaniards came and settled the area back in the 1700s, they erected a lot of these missions, and several of them are still standing. They're tourist destinations. They're part of the National Park Service. They're protected. They're historic sites. And we were next to one of these missions. Now, the missions, a little background information, they were erected in the 1700s by the Spaniards. And in this area, this part of the country, there's archaeological evidence that suggests that Native Americans have been living in the San Antonio area for at least 12,000 years. And these were the Clovis people. They used that famous Clovis point. Paleo-Indian, I think, is the term that they used to describe them. Well, the settlers, the Spaniard settlers, priests that erected the mission, one of their primary tasks were to educate and try and convert the indigenous people to Catholicism. So just bring that to the front here, just to maybe get you to appreciate how long people have been in this area. And a mission, I imagine that there were cemeteries in close proximity to the mission. In fact, when they were installing and upgrading the air conditioning systems for the dormitory, the male dormitory, there were rumors and talk about them digging up old bones. So it's definitely, there were probably no telling how many bodies have been buried in this area. Just a little background information. Well, I was working my night shift, and one of the structures, it was a stone brick structure. It was about 2 or 3 stories tall, if I recall. It had an auditorium. When you first drove into the compound, it was the first building you drove by on the right. And in the middle of the night, it was supposed to be empty. And I was working basically a security job. I would make some rounds and check on the residents. We had at any given time close to 100 people, men and women. Of course, the women were housed separately. And, being that, understanding the demons that they were wrestling with, you had to be present, and just, they required someone to watch over them and just make sure things ran smoothly and everyone got along and maintain their safety and welfare. So that was part of our job at night also, besides making sure that everything was secure. I was working with 2 other gentlemen, and I went over to the auditorium building because it was the closest to our guard shack. We had a guard shack which was on the other side of the driveway across from this auditorium building. And I had to use their facilities, so I went into the bathroom in the middle of the night. I'm the only person in the building. While in the bathroom, I became aware of two women speaking to each other. And it sounded like low volume music, that music usually here in the elevators, but it was a conversation between two women. And then it occurred to me that we don't have music in any of these buildings. And I was straining to hear what they were saying, and it seemed like just when I was about to make out their conversation, it was as if they became aware I was eavesdropping, and they stopped speaking. I immediately thought there's people in the building, and that wouldn't have been an uncommon thing. Like I said, nature of the people we were helping out, it was not unusual to them to try and sneak off and maybe do things they weren't supposed to be doing. So I headed back out to the guard shack, and I let my coworkers know, hey, I heard voices in there. I heard two women's voices in the auditorium building. So one of the gentlemen was going to make rounds around the building. The other gentleman came with me inside, and we searched the area. Auditorium, no one around. No one was upstairs. We had some classrooms and some studios. They used to do some kind of recording. Nothing. We don't have music in the building. We don't have an intercom system in the building. And I had to eat a little crow. It's just like, Jay, what are you're hearing stuff. You're hearing stuff. Yeah, man, I described what happened to him. Now, this facility already had countless ghost stories. And a prevalent one that had come up more than once or twice was that people would see a monk moving through the men's dorm, sometimes stopping at people's bed, this hooded figure with the beads around the waist, classic monk look. So it was just chalk it up. It's another ghost story for this facility, storied facility. And went through the night without incident, and a few days later, we had a gentleman, as it turned out, this was in the evening, just before everything got shut down. We had a gentleman who had been acting peculiarly and was basically having a psychotic break. And I was detailed to transport him to the hospital. Or psych ward. It's a psychiatric crisis facility that specialized in that. And so I'm trying to talk with him, say, okay, you know what, let's do this, it's in your best interest. He didn't want to go, and just trying to be persuasive and just trying to coax him along. It's like, man, I think this is what you really need. All the stuff you think that's going on really isn't. He said, well, they're telling me not to go. And I was like, who's telling you not to go? They're telling me that I shouldn't go with you. And I asked him, well, where are they at? He said, they're over here. I think they're coming in and out, but I think their voices are coming from over here. So I followed him. We walked away from the men's dorm. He's straining to hear. And he said, no, I just need to talk with them. And I said, okay, but make me a promise. We'll track him down. But if we don't find him, or if you do get to talk with him, we need to get you to this facility so we can get you some help, get you stabilized. I said, okay. So we went one direction for a couple of yards. He stopped, and he was like really straining to hear something. And then it's like he was locked on. He pivoted and boom, made a beeline towards the guard shack. As we were approaching it, He's okay, yeah, this is it, is what he said. Then he started to veer left into the direction of the auditorium building. And he stopped right at the entrance doors, and he cocked his head like he was straining to hear. And right away, I have to tell you, I got a weird feeling. I got the EBGBs. And he said, I can't hear them anymore. And I said, well, let me ask you, what were you hearing? Was it two men or what? And he was like, no, it was two ladies. These two ladies have been talking to me for a while. Well, friends, I have to say that the hair on my arms and the back of my neck just raised. It was very unsettling. I said, well, you remember our deal? And he kept to our deal. I was able to get him over to the psychiatric crisis unit, and they took care of him. We finally found out was that he had ingested a whole lot of liquid methamphetamines, and it just was really getting the better of him. But from my lips to God's ears, that is the truth. That is what happened. That's one of my brushes with the supernatural, if you say. But these instruments, I know I talk a lot about tools and EDC, and a couple of my favorite things are flashlights and knives. This is actually the knife that I carried with me at the time. It is a Victorinox Hiker. If you take a look at the blade, you can see it's got a lot of use on it. It was a gift from my father, so it's one of my most valued possessions because of that. My father's not with us anymore, but he still very much loved and remembered. And he'd given me this knife, and I used the snot out of it. I always carried with me, and it got me out of a bunch of jams, and I can guarantee I had it on my possession during that night that I had my adventures. It was a very useful tool. Now, I do not have the Maglite I carried back then. The Maglite I had was an incandescent bronze-colored flashlight. I had that thing for years. I think the batteries exploded in it, and I got rid of it. It was ruined. But this is a more modern LED flashlight, which meant I really could have used back then. The one I had, which was very beloved, I'd had it for over 20 years. It's an incandescent Maglite. I think it only threw a beam of 14 lumens, which is nothing. But at the time, it was like the flashlight to have. It was a high quality flashlight, and it was very useful in this job. As I said, I was working nights and in a dark room or in pitch dark outdoors. If you've ever been in the deep woods or in the middle of nowhere, dim lights project a lot. They'll light things up, and it served me well. So these are my EDC tools I carried at that time. I hope you enjoyed this story. Like I said, it's true. I lived it. It's my experience. Thank you very much.